Next up, we review how to divide and simplify fractions. And in this part of the review, our problems will be broken down into two different groups. Groups that have one term in the denominator, like this one here, and groups that will have two terms in the denominator. And for those ones, we will be doing something called long division. So, for example, things like this guy over here, that will require a long division. So, again, the first kind is the kind where we have one term in the denominator, and those ones are pretty straightforward. All we have to do is follow the guidelines that are described here in this list. So let's begin with the 21 example, part 1, which says 20x to the power of 4 minus 15x, all divided by 5x squared. And again, I want to mention here that this problem has one term only. So for those kinds of problems, what we do is we separate the fraction into multiple pieces. We give each of the terms in the numerator its own denominator. So this is kind of like the opposite of what we did when we were adding and subtracting fractions. We separate the fractions into multiple pieces, given each one of them the 5x squared that was on the denominator, and then we divide out the lowest terms. So like for example, the 20x to the power of 4, that's literally the same thing as 2 times 5 times x, 2, 3, 4 of them, all divided by 5, and then x squared is literally 2x's. And then we just cancel out the terms that are repeating. So 5x and x are repeating. We just remove them from the numerator and the denominator, replace them with 1. Whatever is left, which is 2 times x, is the solution, which in this case will be 4x squared. Then we repeat the same thing again with the second fraction. So it already has 15x, which is literally 3 times 5 times x, all divided by 5x squared, which is 5 times x times x. We take out the repeating terms, which are 5 and x, and we just divide them out. When we divide them out, the solution will give us a 3 on the numerator and an x underneath it. And keep in mind, there was a minus in front, so we just copy that to the front. And that's it. That's how it ends. Very straightforward, very simple. So just basically break the problem apart into multiple pieces, reduce each of the pieces, and whatever you get is your solution. So if I try to do part 2, just like I did with part 1, I'm going to go ahead and give the 8x5y its own denominator, negative 16x to the power of 4y. And then similarly, I give the 32x to the power of 4y its own denominator, negative 16x to the power of 4y. Then finally, the 4x cubed y squared gets its own denominator as well. When you start reducing, keep in mind you want to reduce the numbers with the numbers and the letters with their own kind. So for instance, there's an 8 and there's a negative 16. So when I divide 8 and negative 16, the answer is going to be negative 2, but in the denominator. So I'm going to keep negative 2 down there, and you can put a 1 on the numerator if you decide. Now, for the x's in that fraction, I have x to the power of 5, which means there's 5 of them on the numerator, and x to the power of 4, which means there are 4 on the denominator. So there are 5 x's in the numerator, and there are only 4 in the denominator. So if I cancel 4 from each side, I'll have an extra x written down in the numerator. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the x in the numerator. And finally, there's y to the power of 1, which means 1y, and then y to the power of 1, which is 1y. So if I take out the 1 on top with the 1 on the bottom, there's no more y's left over inside that fraction. So the first fraction is literally negative 1 over 2 and then x on the numerator, or 1x over negative 2, whatever. So now how about the second fraction? So again, start with the plus 32 and the negative 16. If you divide 32 by negative 16, the outcome is going to be a negative 2 in the numerator. So I'm going to put a fraction bar just in case. Now, what about the x to the power of 4s? There's x4 on top and x4 on the bottom. They're identical, so they can cancel each other out completely. When they cancel out, they're both gone. No more x's. And finally, the y's again cancel out completely. Then there's no more y's. So when things go away, they become a 1. So, again, you don't need to write down all those 1s because 2 times 1 times 1 divided by 1 times 1 is going to be at the end 2. So we could just erase all those 1s one by one. And as a matter of fact, we don't even need the fraction anymore. We could just write down minus 2 right there. Finally, the third fraction. There's a negative 4 divided by negative 16. So the outcome there will be positive, and again, a 4 in the denominator. And then keep in mind, there's x's next. X to the power of 3 in the numerator divided by x to the power of 4 on the denominator. So there are 3 x's in the numerator, but 4 in the denominator. So if I take out 3 from the top, 3 from the bottom, I'll have an extra x written down on the bottom. And finally, the y's. How many y's do we have in the numerator? There are 2 of them. So there are 2 letters y, whereas on the denominator, there's only 1 letter y. So if I take out 1 and 1, I'm going to be left with an extra y in the numerator there. So we can leave the answer like that, or we can try to make it a little bit cleaner by writing -1/2 of x minus 2 plus y over 4x. It's up to you whether you do that or not. It's really not required. Either one is fine. So I'll do that just to make it look cleaner. And then finally, the last one is going to be the same. So go ahead and pause the video here, see if you can get it done, and I'll give you the answer in a few seconds. So in my first step, I decided to break the problem apart, and next what I'm going to do is try to divide everything. So the 10 and the 8 can both be divided by 2, and that would give me 5 and 4 on the denominator, rather. There we go. X cubed divided by x squared on the numerator and the denominator gives me an x left over on the numerator. And then y squared on the numerator, y cubed on the denominator gives me a y left over in the denominator. The second fraction will have the 8 left over on the bottom because there's no number on top to divide by it. It's just a 1 over 8, so that's just 8 on the bottom. X squared and x squared cancels out completely, so they're gone. And y to the power of 1, y cubed on the bottom. So we'll cancel out one of the y's and we'll get y squared left over on the denominator. So I need the place filler to hold, the fraction on top, so I'll just put a 1. Next, we have the 8x over 8x squared. The 8's will completely disintegrate. They will cancel each other out. There's x to the power of 1 and x squared. We can cancel one of each. We'll have x left over on the bottom, y squared 2 on top, y cubed 3 on the bottom. We can cancel one of each and a second one of each, and then we'll be left with an extra y on the bottom. Again, I need something on the numerator, so I'll put a 1 as a placeholder. And then finally, the third fraction, we have the negative in front, and 2 divided by 8 will be 4 on the bottom. And you can put a 1 if you want on top, and then cancel out the y's, leave the x's alone. So we end up with